Hello everyone, this is Miguel. There's a fascinating corner of the watch world that has quietly evolved from a niche hobby into a full-blown subculture. It's a space where creativity, aspiration, and accessibility meet in ways that sometimes feel contradictory, yet unintentionally compelling. I'm talking, of course, about the Seiko mod community. What started years ago as enthusiasts tweaking the beloved Seiko SKX, swapping out bezels, adding sapphire crystals, upgrading bracelets, has grown into something entirely different. Today we see full aftermarket builds that borrow visual cues, not from classic Seikos, but from luxury brands like Rolex, Tudor, and even Patek Philippe. And that evolution, that jump from modifying a $200 dive watch to crafting affordable homages of five-figure grails, is at the heart of the watch I'm looking at today. This watch is from Skyline Wrist, an American-based company producing fully built Seiko mod watches and shipping them domestically. That part alone is refreshing. If you ever ordered mod parts or full builds from overseas, you know the fear all too well: unexpected tariffs, import duties, and the sinking feeling that your budget build suddenly isn't so budget anymore. Skyline Wrist bypasses all of that by operating out of the US, which means no surprise fees, no custom paperwork, and at least in my case, no stress. You order it, it shows up, end of story. The model I've spent time with is their GMT Joker, a watch that very clearly draws inspiration from the Rolex GMT Master 2. But before we dive into the broader conversation about homages, let's talk about the actual watch, because the specs paint a picture of something surprisingly substantial for the price. The case measures 40mm across with a thickness of 12mm and a lug-to-lug of 48mm. Those numbers should sound familiar to anyone who has worn, tried on, or at least admired a modern Rolex GMT. On my 6 7/8 inch wrist, it wears in that same Goldilocks zone, balanced, planted, and visually compact in a way that feels intentional. The bracelet is a Jubilee-style design made from 904L stainless steel, just like the case, a detail that genuinely surprised me. Most watches at this price point used to be 16L steel. And while that is more than adequate for daily wear, 904L brings an extra degree of corrosion resistance. It also has this luster and heft that you typically only see on far more expensive pieces. The bracelet also has an on-the-fly micro-adjustment system, something I will always appreciate. For a watch at this price level, $329 to be exact, this tool-free sizing is a huge win. The bezel is made of ceramic, a durable glossy material that resists scratches. The company does offer bezels in the same colorway as some existing Rolex GMT models, but I picked this particular colorway that doesn't exist in the Rolex catalog, so this isn't a one-to-one recreation. Also, the proportions feel slightly altered, and most notably, the bezel is unidirectional. That's a quirky choice because virtually all GMT watches use a bi-directional bezel, which allows the wearer to track a second or third time zone without fighting the ratcheting mechanism. Is it a deal breaker? Not for me, especially considering the price point, but it's a limitation worth noting. The movement inside is a Seiko NH34, a true GMT caliber that brought genuine GMT functionality into affordable watchmaking when it debuted. It's reliable, serviceable, accurate enough, and much like the NH35, something of a workhorse. I've always appreciated Seiko's contribution to the modding community, even unintentionally, and the NH34 feels like an evolution that continues to broaden what's possible at the entry level. You're getting hacking, hand winding, and a jumping GMT hand. Everything you need for real travel functionality, even if the watch itself is more of a tribute piece than a tool watch. Covering everything is a sapphire crystal, which is something early Seiko mods almost never had unless you installed it yourself. Sapphire brings clarity and durability, and here it ties together a package that, visually at least, looks and feels pricier than what it is. Now, while I love many of the details, there are a couple of areas where I think the watch can improve. First is the case back. I've always been a sucker for a display case back, but only when there's something worth displaying. On the NH34, the rotor and bridges are under-decorated, industrial, and functional, which is fine, but not particularly beautiful. In this case, a closed case back would have been a better choice, not only aesthetically, but practically. It could have thinned out the profile a bit and given the watch a more cohesive tool watch character. Second is the lume. The C3 lume has been applied on the hands and indices, but they're not bright, and the hands actually appear to be brighter than the lume on the indices. This is no dive watch, but for a watch that bears the Seiko logo on the dial, lume should not be a compromise. This watch weighs in at 151 grams, giving it a pleasantly solid wrist presence without venturing into wrist anchor territory. The ceramic bezel, the Jubilee bracelet, the 904L stainless steel, all of it contributes to a tactile experience that feels intentional and surprisingly refined given the modest asking price. And that brings us back to the bigger picture. What does it mean that watches like this exist? The Seiko mods have shifted from customizing a known Seiko watch to creating homage pieces using Seiko movements, but not Seiko cases, dials, or branding. I think the answer is simple. It's about fun, accessibility, and imagination. You're not getting Swiss heritage, decades of refinement, or the level of fit and finish found on a true Rolex GMT Master 2, but you are getting the spirit of it, the color, the personality, the wearing experience at a fraction of the cost. And for a lot of people, that's enough. It scratches the itch. It lets you enjoy the aesthetic of a watch you admire without emptying your savings account, and there's nothing wrong with that. For me personally, most Seiko mods and homage builds aren't my cup of tea. I prefer original design languages, cleaner lines, and watches that speak with their own voice rather than borrowing someone else's, but I also understand the appeal. These are watches for enthusiasts on a budget who appreciate quality, who want to experiment, who want to enjoy watch culture in a low-stakes, high-fun environment. And in that sense, Skyline Wrist has created something genuinely interesting and homage that isn't pretending to be anything other than what it is, a playful, affordable, well-made tribute to a classic, powered by a solid Seiko heart and built for people who simply love watches. Let me know your thoughts on mod watches. Are you a fan or are you in the same boat as me? Until next time, be safe out there and stay humble.